My name is Thomas Reed. I'm 53 years old, a former executive vice president of one of the largest financial firms in downtown Chicago. But long before the tailored suits and glass offices, I was just another hungry kid in a broken neighborhood, learning how to survive. I grew up in a rusted trailer parked behind an abandoned diner on the outskirts of Akron, Ohio. My father was a drinker, mean when sober, cruel when drunk. He disappeared for days, sometimes weeks. My mother, a waitress with tired eyes and bruised wrists, held us together with tips, instant coffee, and an iron will. I never blamed her for finally walking out one night and never coming back. I was 13. From that day, I made a silent vow. I would never let my future family go through what I did. I wouldn't just survive, I would conquer. Success wasn't a goal, it was my salvation. I met Rachel during my sophomore year at Northwestern. She was studying education, wore sweaters 3 sizes too big, and smiled like she meant it. I told her on our first real date, "I don't come from much, but I swear to you, I'll never let you go without." She believed me. We married right after graduation. I took a job as a junior analyst at a mid-tier firm, working 80-hour weeks, living on vending machine dinners, trying to claw my way up the ladder. Rachel started teaching at a local elementary school. We lived in a tiny walk-up with mold in the bathroom and dreams that stretched far beyond our means. But we were happy. We were building something. When Rachel got pregnant, I was terrified, but in a good way. I promised her I'd work even harder. "Our child will never know struggle," I said, the same way a soldier might promise to win a war. I didn't expect twins. Neither did she. The pregnancy was rough. Rachel was on bed rest for the last 2 months. I tried to be there. I really did. I attended the doctor's appointments I could, brought her food between meetings, massaged her swollen feet when I got home at midnight. Then came the night. I was in New York, pitching a massive account that could double my department's earnings. I had warned her I'd be gone for 2 days. "Just stay put," I joked on the phone. "Don't go into labor without me." At 3:12 a.m. my phone buzzed. Missed call, then another. Then a voicemail from her best friend, shaky and panicked. "Rachel's in the hospital. The baby's. Something went wrong. You need to come. Now." By the time I landed back in Chicago, it was over. One of the twins, a little girl, hadn't made it. I didn't see Rachel cry. She just lay there, pale and silent, holding the surviving baby like he was the only thing anchoring her to the world. I tried to say something, anything, but the words turned to dust. We never spoke about it. Not once. It was like the twin who didn't make it had vanished from more than just the nursery. I buried myself in work, telling myself it was for them. Rachel stopped teaching and stayed home with Ethan. Our apartment got bigger. The fridge was always full. I bought her a car, a necklace, 1,000 sorries disguised as gifts. Every time I missed a bath time or a doctor's appointment, I reminded myself, this is temporary. I'm doing it for them. Rachel smiled, nodded, kissed me goodbye each morning. But something had shifted. I didn't see it then. I didn't want to. All I knew was that I was running as hard as I could toward the American dream, dragging my family behind me like luggage on a speeding train. The promotions came faster than I expected. Within 5 years, I'd moved from junior analyst to team lead. By year 10, I was managing an entire region. I was the youngest VP in the firm's history, and I wore that badge with pride, even if it cost me sleep, weekends, and every holiday that fell on a fiscal quarter. Rachel stayed home with Ethan, who was growing into a quiet, thoughtful boy. He had her eyes and my stubborn chin. At first, I made every effort to be present. I'd leave early to catch his school plays, rearrange meetings for his soccer games. But over time, those small sacrifices began to feel like liabilities. The first big account I closed made headlines in our industry. My boss slapped my back so hard it left a bruise. "You're built for this," he told me. "Don't slow down." So I didn't. Birthday parties turned into rescheduled dinners. "I'll make it up to you," became my mantra. Ethan would nod, smile politely, and go back to playing with his toys. One night, I came home to find a crayon drawing on the fridge. It was a family picture. Rachel, Ethan, and what I assumed was the twin sister he never got to meet. There was no fourth figure. No me. I laughed. "Where's Daddy in this masterpiece?" Rachel didn't look up from the sink. "Maybe he was at work." I dismissed it. Kids draw weird things. But something about the blank space on that fridge haunted me. By the time Ethan turned 6, he had his first heart murmur. Rachel called me in the middle of a quarterly review. They want to schedule a minor surgery, routine, just to be safe. I told her I'd be there. Then the client moved up a presentation, and I told myself, it's not serious. He won't even remember. I sent flowers, called during the procedure, asked Rachel to update me afterward. She said, "It went fine." That night, I opened a bottle of scotch to celebrate the new contract and toasted silently to a job well done. At work, that is. Years passed. Ethan got older. His drawings stopped altogether. Rachel stopped asking when I'd be home. There were still warm moments, vacations, Christmas mornings, the occasional weekend breakfast. But they became exceptions, not the rule. I convinced myself it was normal. Most dads I knew worked just as much. What I didn't know, what I wouldn't find out until much later, was that Rachel had started writing again. Not fiction, not lesson plans. A journal, a hidden one. Somewhere, in the back of her closet, buried beneath winter coats, was a leather-bound book. Inside, she recorded every missed event. Every time I broke a promise. Every doctor's visit. Every question Ethan asked about me that she couldn't answer. She wasn't trying to build a case. She was trying not to forget how we ended up here. Years later, I'd read a passage dated the day of Ethan's surgery. It said, "He didn't come. I told Ethan Daddy was working to keep us safe." He nodded. Then he asked if Money could hug him while he was scared. I didn't know what to say. I never saw that page when it was written. I didn't know she had cried herself to sleep that night. Because I was at a rooftop bar, drinking bourbon with clients, toasting to numbers on a spreadsheet. I thought she had forgiven me. But forgiveness isn't forgetting. And forgetting was something Rachel refused to do, at least on paper. The dream had arrived. On time, polished, and fully financed. We moved into a 5-bedroom colonial in Hinsdale, the kind with manicured lawns and automatic sprinkler systems that hummed at dawn. Rachel got her dream kitchen with marble countertops. Ethan transferred to a prestigious prep school where the uniforms cost more than my first year's tuition at Northwestern. The garage held a black SUV for her, a silver convertible for me. We had made it. Or so I thought. At work, I had my own floor. Assistants, conference calls, speaking invitations. People hung on my every word. Young associates nodded eagerly at meetings. My calendar looked like a war plan, blocked out in color-coded urgency. I was doing what I had always promised, building a fortress so my family would never know fear, hunger, or cold. But inside that fortress, things were hollow. Rachel had stopped sharing her day with me. We spoke in logistics, Dentist appointments, school forms, groceries. I hadn't seen her laugh in weeks. The once warm banter was replaced with short texts and long silences. We no longer fought. We didn't need to. A cold peace had settled between us, the kind where no one dared touch the frozen middle ground. Our bedroom was now hers. I moved into the guest room after one too many late-night calls had woken her. I told myself it was temporary, that it made sense, that we were adapting. It felt more like I was checking into a hotel inside my own house. One afternoon, I came home early. Rare, but it happened. Ethan had a friend over. I heard them laughing in the backyard. As I stepped outside, I caught the end of a sentence. "And that's Mr. Thomas. He lives here too." Not my dad, not my father. Mr. Thomas. I froze. He looked at me, waved politely, then returned to his game. Later that night, I asked Rachel if she had noticed it. She didn't look up from her book. "He stopped calling you Dad months ago. You didn't notice?" I didn't answer. Because no, I hadn't. I tried to shake it off, tried to reset. I planned a weekend getaway, booked a cabin near Lake Geneva, promised no phones, just us. Rachel declined. "We're not a family you can schedule back together, Thomas." Ethan had soccer, so I went alone. Back at the office, a new hire joined the team. Kara, late 20s, sharp, ambitious, disarmingly perceptive. She laughed at my jokes, brought me coffee without being asked, remembered my schedule better than I did. At first, I told myself she was just efficient, that I was just grateful. But one night, after a client dinner ran late, we ended up at the hotel bar. "I get it," she said, swirling the last of her wine. "Men like you build walls to keep everyone out, and then wonder why you're alone." I stared at her. No one had said that to me in years. Not since Rachel, back in our one-bedroom apartment with mold in the bathroom. Kara leaned in. "Sometimes it's not too late." There was a moment, a flicker, where I saw what could come next. A secret apartment, a second chance, a woman who saw me, who listened. Then I realized she didn't see me. She saw a version of me that I had built, polished, wealthy, put together. But Rachel? Rachel had seen the whole thing. The broke kid with calloused hands and second-hand shoes. The young man who cried on her lap the night his dad finally drank himself to death. She had seen me long before I became Mr. Thomas. I left the bar without saying goodbye. When I got home, the house was quiet. I stood outside Ethan's door for a moment, listening to his soft breathing. I wanted to knock, to walk in, to say something, anything. But I didn't. I went to my guest room instead, pulled the covers up to my chin, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. The fortress I built had become a prison, and I was its only inmate. Rachel had changed. Not in the way people talk about aging or growing distant. It was subtler, sharper, a shift in gravity. She no longer waited for me to come home. She stopped asking if I'd be late, stopped reminding me to call Ethan's school, stopped trying. She had become, in every way, a widow of emotion. Not mournful, just done. She managed the household with precision. Bills were paid early. Ethan's schedule was followed to the minute. Groceries, chores, doctor's appointments, everything handled without input. I had been phased out, not through confrontation, but through quiet irrelevance. At first, I saw it as efficiency. Then I realized she had built a life that worked better without me in it. Her laughter, once easy and unfiltered, now belonged only to others. Ethan, neighbors, the cashier at Whole Foods. I watched her from the kitchen one Sunday, chatting with another mom outside while Ethan tossed a football in the yard. She looked relaxed, happy even, and I wasn't part of that picture. Ethan, too, had found new rhythms. He kept a notebook with every assignment color-coded. He never asked for help, never needed rides. I wasn't home anyway. He packed his own lunches, set his own alarm. By 10, he was more self-sufficient than I had been at 20. His walls were neat, no drawings anymore, just sports posters and a photo of his soccer team. Arms slung over each other's shoulders, dirt on their faces, wide grins. At the edge of that photo was a tall, broad-shouldered man in a coach's jacket, his hand on Ethan's shoulder. Coach Randall. I had heard his name before. Ethan spoke of him often, more often than he ever mentioned me. Coach says I've got a good left foot. Coach says I should try out for travel league. Coach brought us pizza. At first I was relieved. A positive male figure, stability, structure. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. I left work early, an attempt to re-engage, as our therapist later called it. I decided to surprise Ethan at soccer practice, hoping for a moment. A smile, maybe even a high five. I stood at the edge of the field, watching him weave through defenders, confident and quick. Randall barked encouragement from the sideline, clapping, calling out plays. Ethan's face lit up with every word. Then it happened. A kid tripped, scraping his knee. Randall jogged over, knelt, checked on him. Ethan ran up too, hovering with concern. And then, clear as day, I heard Ethan say, "Dad, he's bleeding. Should we get the trainer?" I froze. Randall didn't correct him, just nodded, motioned toward the bench. I felt my chest tighten, my hands go numb. He called another man Dad. Not in jest, not accidentally, but naturally, effortlessly. I turned away before they could see me. On the drive home, I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't call anyone. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles ached. 100 excuses ran through my mind. Maybe it was just a slip, a joke. Maybe Randall hadn't even heard it. But deep down, I knew the truth. My absence had created a vacuum, and someone else had filled it. That night, Rachel noticed something in my face. "Long day?" she asked, folding laundry without looking up. "Yeah," I said. "I stopped by Ethan's practice." She paused. "Did he see you?" "No." She nodded, resumed folding. I wanted to ask if she knew, if she'd heard him say it before, if she was okay with it. But I didn't, because I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Later, I stood outside Ethan's room, listening to him hum along with a game on his tablet. I knocked. "Yeah?" he called. I stepped in. "How was practice?" He shrugged. "Fine." "Coach Randall still yelling a lot?" He smiled. "Yeah, but he's cool." "Cooler than me?" I tried to make it sound light. Ethan looked up, curious. "What?" "Nothing," I said. "Just, never mind." I turned to leave, but before I closed the door, he said, "He shows up, that's all." That's all. The signs were everywhere. I just wasn't looking. Rachel brought it up one evening, calm and measured, as if she were suggesting a change in dinner plans. "I think we should try counseling," she said, setting down her fork. I didn't look up from my phone. "Now? I've got that New York pitch next week. Can we wait until after the quarter closes?" She nodded, as if she'd expected that answer. "Sure," she said. "After the quarter." We never brought it up again. It wasn't the first time she reached out, and it wouldn't be the last. But my responses were always the same. Some variation of later. Later, when work slowed down. Later, when I wasn't so stressed. Later, when things were more stable. But later never came. Friends noticed before I did. At dinner parties, people asked in carefully curated tones, "Everything okay at home?" Or, "Haven't seen Rachel around lately." I'd smile, brush it off. "She's busy with Ethan's school. We're just on different schedules." Some friends stopped inviting us all together. Others, the braver ones, pulled me aside. "Listen," one of my oldest friends said, sipping whiskey on my patio. "Don't take this the wrong way, but when was the last time you had a real conversation with your wife?" I chuckled. "We talk." "No, man, I mean talk. About you two. About life, love, fears, that kind of stuff." I waved him off. "We're fine, just grown-up stuff. Routine." He didn't push. He didn't need to. I knew what he was thinking. I just didn't want to think it too. The most jarring moment came on a random Tuesday in April. Rachel had a meeting, and I, miraculously, had a free morning. She asked if I could attend Ethan's parent-teacher conference. "Just go in," she said, handing me a folder. Mrs. Langston already scheduled it. I arrived at the school early, uncharacteristically nervous. It had been years since I sat in one of those two small plastic chairs across from a teacher. Mrs. Langston greeted me warmly, motioned to sit. "Ethan's a brilliant kid," she began. "Quiet, observant, strong reader. His essays are something else." I smiled. "That's good to hear." She paused, choosing her words. "He tends to write about themes of distance, absence. It's very mature for his age." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She opened a folder and slid it across the desk. Inside were 3 printed essays. I scanned the first title, "The Ghost Who Lives in My House." The second, "How to Pretend You Don't Miss Someone." The third, "Dinner for 3." I read the opening line of the first piece. "He wears suits and smells like someone else's car. He comes home late, eats alone, and leaves early. I think he's my dad, but I'm not sure anymore." My throat went dry. "He never names you," she said gently. "But it's clear. These aren't acts of rebellion. It's reflection. Honest, unfiltered reflection." I flipped through the pages, each word hitting harder than the last. Ethan hadn't lashed out. He hadn't gotten into trouble or yelled or slammed doors. He had written, page after page, sentence after sentence. He had tried to process my absence through metaphors and memory, and I had never seen any of it. "He doesn't show these to me," I said, my voice thinner than I liked. Mrs. Langston smiled softly. "Some children share things more easily with strangers." I nodded, closed the folder, thanked her, and walked out into the hallway. I sat in my car for a full 10 minutes before turning the engine on. The windows fogged. My hands shook. I had built a life so busy, so full, that I hadn't noticed my own son was screaming in silence. When I got home, Rachel was folding laundry in the living room. "How'd it go?" she asked. "He's doing well," I said. "Writing a lot." She didn't respond, just kept folding. I wanted to tell her about the essays, about the ghost, about the ache in my chest that hadn't left since I read those words. Instead, I said, "We should do that counseling thing. I've got some flexibility next month." Rachel folded the last shirt, placed it on the pile, and walked out of the room. The first real warning came in the form of browser history. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a hotel reservation I thought I had emailed to myself, but the shared computer in the study had been used last by Rachel. A few open tabs caught my eye. Real estate listings, all rental apartments, all in her name only. Downtown, Logan Square, Evanston, Different school districts, different zip codes, different futures. At first, I rationalized it. Maybe she was helping a friend. Maybe she was curious. People looked at Zillow listings all the time. But then I noticed a saved search folder titled, "Just in Case." She had a plan, a silent one. That night, she was on the couch, reading. I sat across from her, not saying a word. The air between us felt heavier than usual. "Are you planning to leave?" I finally asked. She didn't look up. "Not planning, just preparing." There was no anger in her voice, no drama, just truth. "I've stayed for a long time, Thomas, longer than most people would. But Ethan's almost 13. If I don't start over soon, he'll grow up thinking this is normal." My mouth went dry. "You want to take him with you?" "He's not a possession. He's a person. But yes, I think it would be healthier." I didn't know what to say. I hadn't fought for this marriage in years. Now that it was slipping away, I realized I'd never really believed it would. I tried, briefly, to change the narrative. I made dinner twice that week, canceled a weekend golf trip, sat at the table during breakfast. Rachel acknowledged the gestures but didn't respond to them. Her eyes had already left. Then came the call from Mr. Kinney, Ethan's homeroom teacher. "Mr. Reed," he said carefully, "I wanted to check in. Ethan's grades haven't slipped, but his demeanor has. Withdrawn, less responsive. He's quiet by nature, I know. But lately, it's different." I thanked him, assured him we'd talk to Ethan. Hung up. That evening, I sat on the edge of Ethan's bed. He had earbuds in, staring at the ceiling. "Hey, bud," I said, gently tapping his knee. He took one earbud out. "Yeah? I got a call from your teacher. He says you've been kind of quiet lately." "I'm always quiet." "Yeah, but this is different, right?" He shrugged. I searched for words. "You know, you can tell me anything." Ethan looked at me like he was trying to decide whether that was true. Then he said, "I'm fine." He put his earbud back in and turned away. I left the room feeling like a stranger in my own home. Later that week, I found it. His backpack had been left open on the kitchen stool. A notebook was sticking out, a red one I hadn't seen before. I flipped it open, looking for homework. Instead, I found a letter. Unfinished, unaddressed. It was written in Ethan's neat, deliberate handwriting. "When I turn 18, I'm gone. I don't care where. I just need to be somewhere else. I don't want to be part of this house. Not because of Mom, because of him. He doesn't yell, he doesn't hit, but he's not here. And when he is, he's still not really here. I won't be like him. I won't forget what matters." I sat down on the tile floor, just sat there, letter in hand. Knees pulled to my chest like a child. He wasn't planning to rebel. He was planning to disappear. He wasn't angry. He was done. When Rachel walked in and saw me holding the letter, she didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. She just said, "Now do you understand?" And for the first time in years, I did. The boardroom was polished to perfection. Glossed mahogany table, bottled water labels all facing forward, chairs aligned like soldiers. I had spent the last month preparing for this meeting. The board was expected to finalize their vote. I was next in line for CEO. 15 years of loyalty, of sacrifice, of delivering results no matter the cost. And now, this was it. The projector hummed softly. My presentation sat cued on the screen. Clean fonts, bulletproof projections, market growth laid out like a runway. My assistant gave me a nod from the doorway. I adjusted my tie. As I stepped up to the podium, my phone buzzed once in my jacket pocket. Then again, and again. 3 calls, all from Rachel. I froze. She never called during meetings. Ever. I let it buzz once more, then slipped it out and silenced it. "Let's begin," I said, clearing my throat. The lights dimmed. The first slide clicked into place. 10 minutes in, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. I hit ignore, my hand trembling just slightly. When the call came again, I felt the room blur for a second. I excused myself, stepped into the hallway, and finally answered. A woman's voice on the line, calm, professional, urgent. "Mr. Reed, this is St. Michael's Medical Center. Your son, Ethan Reed, was brought into our ER following a motorcycle accident. He's stable, but there are concerns. Head trauma, internal bleeding. He's currently being prepared for surgery." My knees buckled slightly. I leaned against the wall. "Is he awake?" I asked. "Not at the moment. Your wife is en route. We recommend you come as soon as possible." I looked back through the glass wall at the boardroom. My slides were still up. My name was still at the top of the agenda. This moment would decide the next decade of my professional life. Rachel was already on her way. The hospital had what they needed. I could finish the presentation and still make it before Ethan came out of surgery. I took a deep breath and walked back in. The lights dimmed again. I continued speaking, even as the words in my head were replaced by 3 others. Motorcycle, trauma, surgery. By the time I reached the final slide, the room burst into applause. Hands were shaken. A contract was slid across the table for preliminary signature. I smiled, thanked them, said I had a family emergency and needed to step away. Only then did I call a car to the hospital. When I arrived, Rachel was pacing in the waiting area, her eyes red and raw. "What happened?" I asked. She stared at me like I was a stranger. "He was on a friend's bike. No helmet. He wasn't thinking." "Where is he?" "ICU. They're monitoring him." I started toward the hallway, but Rachel stepped in front of me. "You should know. He asked for you not to come in." I blinked. "What?" She swallowed hard. "He's awake now, confused, scared. And when the nurse asked if he wanted his father, he said..." She stopped, looked away. "What did he say?" She met my eyes. "He said, 'I don't need strangers in my room.'" I stood frozen. A nurse came around the corner just then. "Are you Mr. Reed?" I nodded. "He's stable, you can see him if he agrees, but..." She looked at her chart. "He's refused your presence for now." I felt the blood drain from my face. Rachel sat back down in one of the waiting chairs. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't speak. And for the first time in my life, I truly understood what it meant to be irrelevant. The title, the applause, the CEO contract in my briefcase, it all meant nothing. Because the one person I had worked for all these years didn't want to see me. Not in celebration, not in crisis, not even when he was broken and bleeding in a hospital bed. I stood there for a long time, staring at the locked door between me and my son. A door that wasn't built by the hospital, but by every missed birthday, every silenced call, every promise I'd replaced with a boardroom. Rachel didn't come home that night. She stayed at the hospital with Ethan while I wandered the silent halls of our house, the walls echoing with everything I hadn't said and everywhere I hadn't been. The kitchen was spotless. The lights in the hallway dimmed at their usual timer. It was all functioning, without me. I sat at the dining table until dawn. When the front door opened just after 6, I stood up like a man caught trespassing in his own life. Rachel stepped inside, her face pale and exhausted, her eyes hollowed from a night of vigilance. She dropped her bag without a word and walked straight past me. "How is he?" I asked. "Stable," she replied, not slowing down. I followed her to the kitchen. "Can I see him today?" She turned. "You'll have to ask him." I nodded. "I will." Rachel walked to the cupboard, pulled down a small leather-bound book, and tossed it onto the table between us. "What's this?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "Read it." I opened the first page, April 12th. He missed Ethan's first piano recital, said he had a call with Tokyo, promised to watch the video, never did. May 9th, didn't make it to Mother's Day brunch, again. June 22nd, told Ethan he'd be at the father-son camping trip. Ethan packed 2 weeks early. Thomas canceled the morning of, page after page, year after year. Every broken promise, every absence, every lie dressed as work. I flipped to the middle, then the end. The entries grew shorter, not because there was less to say, but because she had stopped expecting anything different. Rachel stared at me. "I didn't keep that to punish you. I kept it because I needed to remind myself I wasn't going crazy." I sat down, stunned. "You always made me feel like I was overreacting," she continued. "That I was too emotional. That you were doing everything for us. But I was living a life alone, raising a child alone, watching him grow bitter alone." She stepped closer. "You want to know what broke me?" I looked up. She pointed to the book. June 3rd, Ethan's 7th birthday. He waited at the window for 4 hours. Said he wouldn't blow out the candles until you came. I kept the cake in the fridge for 3 days. My mouth opened, but no words came out. "And last week," she said, her voice trembling, "he told me he'd rather be unconscious than have to talk to you." I put my head in my hands. She took a breath, steadied herself. "I signed divorce papers 3 years ago," she said. "They're in the drawer under my scarves." That got my attention. "You what?" "I never filed them. Ethan begged me not to. He said maybe you'd change. Maybe you just didn't know how to be here yet. He wanted to believe in you." She paused. I didn't. Silence. Then, a voice came from the hallway. "Do you know I'm allergic to peanuts?" Ethan. He stood in his hospital-issued hoodie, arm in a sling, face pale but firm. I stared at him. "Of course I do." He cocked his head. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said. "Why would you ask that?" "Because on my 9th birthday, you brought cupcakes to school. From that bakery you liked downtown. You told everyone I loved them." He looked at me coldly. "I had to go to the nurse's office with hives. You never asked what flavor I wanted. You never even asked if I could eat them." I felt my stomach drop. "I almost ended up in the ER," he said. "But you were already gone. You dropped them off and rushed to your meeting." Rachel didn't say a word. Ethan turned, walked back down the hall without waiting for a response. I sat there, paralyzed, the weight of it all finally pressing down. All the dinners, all the deals, all the late nights and red-eye flights. I had traded everything that mattered for everything that didn't. And now, my family was done waiting for me to figure it out. That night, I sat alone in my home office, the shrine of my ambition. Every object in that room symbolized what I had built. Framed awards, signed deals, expensive pens, and a wall-sized whiteboard with quarterly goals written in red marker. I stared at the laptop on my desk. Emails kept pinging, reminders of meetings, a congratulatory note from the board. "Looking forward to finalizing your new contract." A calendar invite for the next leadership retreat. I walked over, unplugged the charger, and in one sudden, shaking motion, I lifted the laptop above my head and slammed it against the edge of the desk. Plastic cracked. The screen shattered. Keys flew like broken teeth. I didn't stop. I brought it down again. And again. Until the machine was no longer a machine, just a heap of metal and glass, and every choice I wished I could take back. Then I wrote my resignation. No speech, no fanfare, just a 2-line email typed on my phone. I will not be accepting the promotion. Effective immediately, I resign. I need to reclaim what I've lost. Then I powered off the phone and left it on the remains of the laptop. I shut the door to the office, turned off the light, and didn't come out for 2 days. I didn't eat, didn't shower, I barely slept. I cried like a man who had finally understood he was not the hero of his story, but the villain who thought he was saving the castle while setting it on fire. The first night, I lay on the carpet, holding a photo from Ethan's 3rd birthday. He had cake on his face. I wasn't in the picture. The second night, I began to write. A letter. By hand. On actual paper. The way Rachel always loved. The way Ethan had learned to express himself when I wasn't listening. I didn't edit it. I didn't plan it. I just let the words come. Rachel, I've spent my entire life thinking I was protecting you by staying away. I thought that as long as the bills were paid, and the lights were on, and the fridge was full, I was doing my part. But love doesn't live in electricity bills or organic groceries. It lives in being seen, heard, touched. And I haven't seen you in years. Not truly. Ethan, I thought I was being strong, that showing up to work meant I was showing up for you. But strength isn't in working late. It's in asking how your day went, in remembering your allergies, in showing up when you're hurt, not just when it's convenient. There's something I need to tell you both, something I've never said out loud. 2 months ago, before the board vote, I sat in a hotel room in New York. It was past midnight. I had just delivered a pitch that could have changed my life. I was alone. I ordered room service, stared out the window, and thought about ending everything. Not because I didn't love you, but because I believed I had already failed too completely to ever earn you back. I didn't do it. Not because I suddenly felt hopeful, but because I saw your faces in my mind. And for the first time, I realized there was still a road back. It would be long, uphill, and I might have to crawl. But if there was even a 1% chance that you'd wait for me at the end of it, then I had to start walking. So I'm walking now, and I'll keep walking, even if it takes the rest of my life. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove I can be someone worth forgiving. I love you. Thomas. I folded the letter, slid it under Ethan's door, and placed a copy on Rachel's pillow. Then I sat in the living room and waited. Not for applause, but for silence to answer me back. The CEO ceremony was scheduled for Monday morning. Press coverage, a catered lunch, a symbolic handshake with the outgoing executive. My name was printed on the invitation. They'd already updated the website with my photo, but I never showed. Instead, I walked into the office at dawn, placed a sealed envelope on my boss's desk, and walked out without saying a word. The note inside was simple. I won't be taking the position. I've already spent too many years chasing the wrong legacy. I drove home with the windows down. No music, just wind and silence and the strange, foreign feeling of finally choosing something for the right reason. When I got home, Rachel was in the kitchen. She looked surprised to see me at that hour. I quit, I said. She blinked. You... what? I turned it down. I'm done. There was a long pause. She didn't hug me, didn't cry, But something in her posture softened, like a wall had shifted just slightly in its foundation. Later that afternoon, I gathered them both in the living room, Rachel and Ethan, and pitched an idea like I would to a client. "A week," I said. "No phones, no email, no hotels, just the three of us off the grid." Rachel raised an eyebrow. Ethan looked skeptical. "Camping?" he asked. I nodded. "We hate camping," Rachel said flatly. "I know. That's why it has to be that." They didn't say yes immediately. But the next morning, Rachel was packing bug spray, and Ethan was loading sleeping bags into the trunk. Progress. We drove 3 hours north to a state park near the Wisconsin border. No cell service, no TV, just pine trees, dirt paths, and the occasional squirrel that terrified Rachel. I fumbled with the tent. Ethan laughed. Rachel helped. We cooked over fire, burned half our dinner, and ate the rest while swatting mosquitoes. And we talked. Not about work, not about school, about music. About the time Rachel fell off a bike when we were dating and pretended she wasn't hurt. About Ethan's dream to become a writer. About nothing and everything. By the third night, something shifted. We were sitting around the fire. Ethan had fallen asleep beside us, his head resting on a sweatshirt. Rachel and I watched the flames crackle, wrapped in a shared silence that wasn't uncomfortable for the first time in years. She glanced at me. "You're trying." I nodded. "I'm late, but I'm here." She looked at our son, then back at me. "Don't stop." The next afternoon, Ethan wanted to explore a trail alone. We were at a secluded part of the park, and he insisted he knew the path. "Just an hour," he said. "I want to clear my head." We let him go. When 2 hours passed and he didn't return, the panic began to set in. By the third hour, I was shouting his name into trees, pushing through underbrush, my shirt soaked with sweat. By the time the sun began to fall, I was breathless, frantic, tearing through every path I could find. Rachel called the ranger station. I refused to wait. Night fell. It was nearly midnight when I found him, curled under a tree, hugging his knees, his flashlight dead beside him. When he saw me, his eyes welled up. "I didn't mean to go that far," he whispered. I dropped to my knees, pulled him into my arms, held him tighter than I had in years. He buried his face in my shoulder. "Why'd you come?" I pulled back, confused. "What do you mean?" "I thought you'd wait, or send someone, or finish the trip without me." I looked him in the eye. "You're my son." He nodded slowly. Then, in a voice that broke me open, he said, "This is the first time you picked me over everything else." And then he cried. And so did I. Not because I had found him, but because I had finally started to find myself. Coming back from the camping trip, I felt different. I'd expected skepticism, distance, awkward pauses, but what I hadn't prepared for was silence. Not the cold, punishing kind we'd lived in for years, but a cautious quiet. The kind you offer someone who's failed you before and might fail you again. Rachel moved around the house like she was waiting for something to snap. Not confrontational, but guarded, civil, measured. Her eyes no longer held disdain, but they didn't hold trust either. One morning over coffee, she finally said what we were both thinking. "I appreciate what you're doing," she said, her voice steady. "But I'm not going to let Ethan believe in something that might disappear again." "I'm not disappearing," I said. "You've said that before." She wasn't wrong. Ethan, meanwhile, made his boundaries clear. During breakfast, he slid a handwritten note across the table. It read, "1 hour per day. That's all I can do right now. Please don't ask for more." He'd made a schedule, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. every night. That was our time. 1 hour, No phones, no work talk, just us. I nodded and thanked him. I didn't cry, even though I wanted to. 1 hour was more than I deserved, so I used it. The first few evenings, we sat on the couch in stiff silence, watching his favorite shows. I tried to ask questions. He gave one-word answers, sometimes none. On the fourth night, he handed me a video game controller. "You're going to suck," he said flatly. He was right. I died in the first 3 minutes, but he laughed. A real one. And that was enough. Outside of that hour, I started filling the silence with something useful. I washed dishes, cleaned the garage, took out the trash before anyone asked. I made a calendar of house chores and stuck it to the fridge. Rachel didn't acknowledge it, but she didn't take it down either. I signed up for a yoga class, the same one Rachel had mentioned years ago that I'd always shrugged off as not my thing. I showed up to the studio wearing the wrong shoes and holding the wrong mat. She saw me across the room and almost smiled. Almost. I began to cook. Badly at first. Burnt eggs, under-seasoned pasta. But I kept trying. Eventually, Ethan agreed to let me help with his lunchbox. We made sandwiches together. He taught me how to cut the crusts the right way. The walls were still there, but I could feel them shifting. Then came the moment. It was a Thursday. We were in the middle of our hour, playing that same video game side by side, losing miserably to some 12-year-old online. I leaned over, trying to read the on-screen map. My hand bumped Ethan's. He laughed and said, "Dad, you're hopeless at this." Then everything went still. He froze. I froze. We both heard it. Dad. The word hung in the air like a fragile ornament, seconds away from shattering. He looked at me, eyes wide, his mouth opened slightly, like he might apologize or backpedal or take it back. I said nothing. Rachel had been walking by the living room, carrying laundry. She stopped. Heard it too. She didn't say anything either. The moment passed. Ethan picked up the controller, eyes locked on the screen. "Let's just finish the level," he mumbled, and we did. No one mentioned it afterward. But later that night, I sat on the edge of my bed and let the word echo in my head. Dad. It was accidental, a slip, a glitch in the system, but it meant everything. Because for the first time in years, he'd let the word come naturally. I didn't need a conversation or a hug or a second one right away. That one moment, that one word, was a crack in the wall. And all I had to do now was keep showing up and push light through it. Change didn't come in waves. It came in teaspoons, a laugh at breakfast, a second helping of pancakes, Ethan asking if I wanted to join him for a walk to the mailbox, Rachel leaving her coffee mug on the table instead of rinsing it immediately, as if the house didn't need to be perfectly controlled anymore. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We just lived. Some nights we all sat at the dinner table again. Ethan cracked a joke. Rachel responded. I chimed in. The sound of shared laughter, once extinct in our house, started to reappear. Not forced, not theatrical, just real. We began to exist together, not as strangers navigating polite survival, but as a family rediscovering rhythm. One evening, as Rachel washed dishes and Ethan finished homework, I sat at the kitchen island with a notebook open in front of me. I've been thinking, I said, about telling my story. Rachel turned off the water. To who? To everyone, I said. Maybe not just you two. Maybe others need to hear it. She eyed me carefully. Why now? I paused. Because if one more father watches his kid grow up through photos, if one more husband thinks working late means loving hard, maybe hearing from someone who already lost it all will change something. I recorded the first video on my phone, sitting in the living room with nothing but a lamp behind me. "Hi," I said to the lens, voice shaking. "My name is Thomas Reed, and I used to think being a provider meant being absent. I thought money could buy back birthdays. I thought success would save me. I was wrong. I talked about missing Ethan's recital, his allergic reaction, the camping trip, the hospital. I didn't spare myself. By the end, I was crying. Rachel watched from the doorway, silent. I posted the video on a whim, under a new account called Dad Who Woke Up Too Late. The next morning, it had 42 views. By evening, 1,200. Within a week, 2.4 million. The comments flooded in. "This is my dad. This is me. You're giving me hope that maybe it's not too late." People shared it, quoted it. Teachers used it in class. Marriage counselors emailed me for permission to show it in sessions. Ethan said nothing about it. I didn't push. A few days later, I walked into the living room and saw him quickly close his laptop. "Homework?" I asked. "Yep," he said too fast. I let it go. That night, Rachel pulled me aside. "Ethan sent your video to someone," she said. "Who?" She showed me her phone. A screenshot of an email Ethan had forwarded to his middle school teacher, Mr. Kinney. In the message, he'd written, "This is my dad. I think you should see it. I think he's back." I stared at the words for a long time. Not "he's trying," not "he's improving." He's back. It was a declaration, a belief, a second chance spoken through a whisper. I walked into Ethan's room that night. He was reading. I didn't say anything. Just sat on the edge of his bed. He looked up, waiting. "I saw what you sent, Mr. Kinney," I said quietly. "Oh, I'm glad you think that." He shrugged. "Yeah, well, don't screw it up." I laughed, softly, carefully. "Deal." He didn't say more, but he didn't ask me to leave either. And for now, that was enough. Because the truth was, this rebuilding, this rebirth, it wasn't about grand gestures anymore. It was about dinners with laughter, about unsent drafts of goodbye letters that never needed to be finished, about a boy quietly calling me Dad when he thought no one was listening, and a whisper that told the world, "He's back." We moved 6 months later. Out of the city, away from the skyline and conference rooms and impossible commutes, into a smaller town with slower mornings and neighbors who waved without checking their watches. The house we found was nothing like the one we left behind. No smart kitchen, no marble island, no 3-car garage. Just a porch that creaked when you stepped on it, and a backyard big enough for a treehouse. Rachel found a job teaching again. 3rd grade. She came home each day with glitter on her sleeves and stories about kids who still believed in magic. I took a position teaching economics at the local high school. It didn't pay much. My title was Mr. Reed, not Vice President. My office had a flickering light and a broken filing cabinet. But every morning when I walked into that classroom and looked at those students, some with tired eyes, some hungry, some already believing success meant leaving people behind, I felt useful in a way I never had before. And at home, things kept shifting. Rachel started leaving notes in my lunchbox, simple ones. "Don't forget, you're the good kind of stubborn. Proud of you. Love, your wife." One night, I was standing at the sink doing dishes when she came up behind me and kissed my shoulder. "You know," she whispered, "I called you honey today in front of a neighbor." I smiled. "Was that an accident?" She shrugged. Didn't feel like one. It was the first time she'd used any term of endearment in almost 8 years. The night before Ethan's 13th birthday, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a list, but not the kind I used to write. It had only one item: my birthday wish. You and Mom sing happy birthday. Together. To me. Out loud. I looked up. "You've never done it," he said simply. He wasn't wrong. There had always been excuses, late arrivals, work calls, awkward silences between Rachel and me. One of us held the camera, one of us lit the candles, but neither of us had ever sung. Not together. Until now. The next night, with candles flickering on a chocolate cake we baked as a family, Rachel cleared her throat. I joined her. "Happy birthday to you." Our voices were out of sync, off-key and shaky. Ethan laughed halfway through. But he didn't stop us. When we finished, he blew out the candles, looked at both of us and said, "That was the best one." No gifts had been exchanged yet. No presents unwrapped. Just our voices, united in a song that finally belonged to all of us. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I stood alone in the kitchen, watching the last flame on the birthday candle melt into a puddle of wax. I thought about the years I'd lost, the moments I'd traded for meetings and margins. But tonight hadn't been about regret. It had been about return. The kind that doesn't come with fireworks, but with a song. A voice you thought had gone quiet forever, singing again. Together. The book began on a napkin. I had been grading papers in the teacher's lounge when a phrase popped into my head. 6 words I couldn't ignore. Don't let them forget, because they won't. I scribbled it down and stared at it for nearly an hour. That sentence felt like a whisper from the man I used to be to the one I had become. It turned into a title. The title turned into chapters. Late nights, handwritten notes, memories I'd buried under board meetings and salary bonuses. One by one, I brought them to life again. I didn't write to impress. I wrote to confess. I wrote for the father who missed his child's first steps, for the husband who thought money could buy back trust, for the man who still had time, if only he'd stop waiting for the right moment. When the manuscript was finished, I didn't expect much. I self-published. No tour, no big-name endorsements. But something happened. Again. People read it, shared it, the same way they had with the vlog. The message resonated. Within a few months, I received an invitation to speak at a national summit on work-life balance in the modern age. They asked if they could open the event with my original video. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want them to, but because part of me still felt like an imposter. But Rachel squeezed my hand. "You've lived this. Own it." So I said yes. The auditorium was larger than I expected. Hundreds of attendees, stage lights, name badges, programs with my face in the back pages. As I waited behind the curtain, I heard the opening chords of my video. My voice from a different time began to echo through the room. My name is Thomas Reed, and I thought success meant sacrifice. Until I realized the thing I sacrificed couldn't be bought back. The screen faded. Applause followed. Then the host took the stage. Tall, confident, early 40s, well-spoken. When he introduced himself, my breath caught in my chest. "I'm honored to welcome our keynote guest today, but before that, I should tell you, I once had a student named Ethan. He was quiet, bright, and thoughtful. He told me years ago that he believed his father could still change. And now I get to introduce that father. It was Mr. Kinney, Ethan's old teacher. He looked right at me. "I've waited a long time to shake this man's hand," he said. I walked out, blinking against the stage lights, and we met in the center. He didn't shake my hand. He pulled me into a hug. The audience stood. I didn't speak for a moment. I couldn't. Eventually, I took the mic and smiled through wet eyes. I used to think legacy was something you built with titles and trophies, but now I know. It's built in breakfasts, in bedtime stories, in how your child says your name when they think no one's listening. I glanced at Mr. Kinney, and sometimes, legacy looks like someone who believed in your son long before you did. The applause didn't feel like a reward. It felt like forgiveness. After the event, Mr. Kinney pulled me aside. He sent me that video, said you were back. He was right. I nodded, unable to say more. Back home that evening, Ethan asked how the event went. I told him everything, except the hug. That part, I wanted to keep for myself. He smiled and went back to his book. As I watched him, I realized the final lesson of this journey wasn't about work or guilt or redemption. It was about presence. Because in the end, the greatest thing I ever built wasn't a company. It was a second chance. And this time, I didn't miss it.